Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is Seeking Advice on What to Do About My Son by End the Madness, please. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street. And let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. Hey guys, I wasn't really sure where to post this, since it'll probably get taken down in other threads. So at the start of this year, I finally got to visit my nan in Ireland after COVID restrictions lifted. She hasn't been able to meet my son, we'll call him Sam, until now. She lives just outside of a town called Mallow, near Cork, where my mother's whole family originates from. Not an easy travel when alone with a 3-year-old. Sam's father is not involved. So the goal was to stay for 2 weeks in Ireland with Nan, and not to do much inter-country traveling since I don't have a license, and public transport with a screaming child is a nightmare. For the first few nights, Sam kept having horrific nightmares, waking up screaming. It was his first time traveling, so I chalked it up to anxiety and a change of beds. God, I was so wrong. It was unsettling when he said that the old woman was tapping at his window. I had assumed he was referring to Nan, who most certainly wasn't standing outside his window in the middle of a winter night. I let him sleep in my bed for the following few nights, but I encouraged him to go back to his own bed halfway through our stay. There was a storm that night. I barely slept myself, with the wind howling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. I wanted to wake up Sam and bring him into my bed to keep him safe from the unknown fear. I should have listened to my gut. A mother knows even if she can't verbalize what she's afraid of. The window shattered in Sam's room. Police would chalk it up to a branch blowing in the wind. The next morning, when I got to the room, he was gone. I don't think that sinking feeling of terror can be explained in words. Had he climbed out the window? Had he been kidnapped? It was sub-zero winter. My baby was out there in his pajamas. I had to be taken to the nearest hospital when I refused to stop searching in the cold and got hypothermic. I'll give it to the people of Mallow. Almost 100 folk turned up to help search for Sam at dawn. Word had gotten around quick. My nan is an institution there, and whole families got out there to look for him. I still tear up thinking about the people who brought hot cocoa and children's clothes with them just in case they found him. We started to think he had to have been kidnapped because a child couldn't have made it that far from the house in those conditions. My only hope was that whoever had him was keeping him warm. It was hard to sleep the following night. The police urged me to stay home and try to rest, so I sat in bed and waited anxiously by the phone for a miraculous call. You can imagine my surprise when I got up the next morning and saw a little blonde boy sitting upright in the spare bedroom. Sam was back. The primal scream I gave out didn't faze him at all. I should have known something was wrong then, but I was wrapped up in the moment. Police had no idea how to explain it. The window had been repaired, so how did he get back in? The doors were all locked. His captors would have had to pick a lock, place him in, and sneak back out, all while I was awake. The relief quickly faded with the nasty wrap-up. I think the police suspected me of staging the whole thing somehow, but they respected Nan enough not to push that theory too far beyond uttering musings. There were no car tracks anywhere near the property. That's a bit weird. Still, Sam was back, and that was what mattered. But something was still wrong. The hospital had cleared him. He'd been fed, and he wasn't at all cold. But they did find twigs in his hair, and remnants of dirt under his fingers. He had been outside, but not long enough to get cold. I was worried how all this had impacted him mentally. He was listless and disturbingly motionless. Usually, he was bouncing everywhere, whether screaming or crying. This subdued nature was not like him. I asked if the doctors could check if he was drugged, because it was so abnormal. Sam said he didn't remember what had happened, only that he was with his friends. He couldn't describe them, simply staring blankly at the police when they tried to get details. It's hard to explain. He wasn't speaking like a toddler either. No stuttering or ums or huzz, but rather short, calculated sentences. I can't say any more, he told an officer flatly. We don't know if that meant he couldn't remember, or if he refused to say anything else. Only once he was released back into the house did I notice another change. Sam had greenish eyes. Now they were icy blue. It's not something I could easily prove was that different, but photos were able to partially confirm this change, even if it was just the lighting. It all felt like a nightmare. I wanted to be relieved my son was okay, but I wasn't sure what to do to help him return to normal. I confided in Nan, an absolute rock of a woman, and she put even worse thoughts in my head. In older times, Zebra would take wee ones off to their kingdoms and leave a changeling in their place. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but our situation seems to follow that track. Maybe I overreacted, but I was furious at her. I knew she believed in folktales, but, not to the point of basically accusing my child of being an evil fairy. We left the next night and spent the rest of the time in a hotel in Cork. If you know the history of changelings, you can put together it was basically a way for parents to explain their children being disabled or neurodivergent. Shake your baby, and now he's acting off. Fairy took him. Your baby's slower at developing cognitive skills. Fairy swapped out your normal baby for a defective one. It's a dangerous superstition, and I wasn't going to feed into it. But now that we're back home, I'm wondering if there's more truth to it than I'm willing to admit. How did his eyes change? How did his captors get him in and out so easily? And why was he acting so different? Sam seems emotionally beyond his years now. He has not cried once since we returned, nor has he laughed. His father noticed he's different too. He barely sees his son, and even he thinks his personality has completely changed. His dad's family thinks Sam might be autistic or something. I've lined up mental examinations to try and find an answer that suits a real-world explanation. I've woke up to Sam standing at the end of my bed, watching me sleep. He doesn't react to me sitting up. It's so unsettling. I've considered getting a lock for my door. Sometimes He just stares at himself in the mirror and rubs his hand around his cheeks in a circle, like applying invisible moisturizer. He'll do this for minutes on end without blinking. He only blinks if he knows he's being watched. I've recorded him on the outside house security cam, standing rigid, staring at the gate without blinking. He barely looks to be breathing either. I'm not sure what to do. If it's just my son acting different, then we have to learn to live with change. But if he's not my son, then my Sam is somewhere in the Irish countryside. It's not like I can tell anyone else about my fears. They'll take him away from me if I start spouting off about changelings, and I'll be the mentally defect one. There is no winning here.